Welcome to the Made to Parade podcast, sponsored by the British Drum Company, manufacturers of the Phantom, Regimental Series and Axial Parade drums that look amazing, sound amazing, and feel amazing.
Alrighty, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Made to Parade podcast. You're joining us on episode number 4 of season number 6, and I really hope you've enjoyed the first 3 episodes. There are some great conversations with Drum Derg, Lisburn Young Defenders, and also the Parkinson Accordion Band. One of the things that I've been asked a lot about, especially by flute players, is could we do something like a podcast or an episode with one of the flute makers and maybe talk a wee bit about flute maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So I'm absolutely delighted today to have a very special guest with us who not only makes flutes, but makes lots of other instruments as well, and will be reasonably well known to some members of the band scene here. There'll be a number of bands that'll be carrying our guests' flutes, and I'm absolutely delighted to have Pete Worrell on the podcast with us today. So I'm just going to bring Pete in now, and we'll have a wee bit of a conversation around flutes and bands and all sorts of stuff, music here. So here we go.
Hi, Pete. Thanks very much for having me.
Not a problem at all, Pete. Absolutely fantastic. Great to have you on, and great to have a flute maker on the show and talk a wee bit about that whole process. And I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted to be an owner of one of your flutes. You made one for me not that long ago, and I'm using it on a regular basis. I absolutely love it. So thanks very much for taking the time out to be with us.
You're welcome.
Maybe a good place for us to start was some people will know you just because they've bought your flutes, whatever. Maybe a good place for us to start is give us a wee bit of an introduction to yourself, you know, who you are, and maybe a wee bit of, say, maybe your musical background.
Yeah, sure. I started playing clarinet when I was the age of 6. I took lessons, and I learned from a jazz player called Jack. Just found him in the phone book, you know. My dad found him, and so I had lessons with Jack for a few years, and then we managed to get some lessons at school. So I switched from jazz music to classical, which was kind of the thing to do, really. And I carried that through all the way through my school years. I actually went for an audition at Royal College of Music for the junior orchestra on a Saturday. I must admit, I mean, I was only 14 or 15, and whilst I thought I was quite a good player, when I was actually in the rehearsal room with the other people auditioning, I realised that maybe I wasn't quite what they were looking for. But that was okay, because, you know, it made me think about the way I look at music, and I wanted to absolutely stay in music, but I knew that my career probably wasn't going to be as a performer. So I was into cycling as well. You know, I was 13, 14. I was doing a bit of racing. But as soon as I could leave school, I did. I didn't stay on for any further exams or anything like that, because I wanted to work. You know, I wanted to do something, and it kind of just, well, I wouldn't say I fell into musical instrument making. I made a conscious decision to try and stay within music, and I had interviews with a brass company, company that made accordions, and finally managed to get a job with Howarth, who are the oboe makers.
Right.
And I was an apprentice there.
Okay, cool. Rolling it back a wee touch there, Pete, if you don't mind. What was it that drew you to the clarinet? Was there, you know, a reason why that was the instrument that you started playing?
Well, I was fortunate that my parents gave us children the opportunity to try any instrument that we fancied. So my sister chose the flute, My brother, I think he chose the trumpet. I mean, none of them continued, but they've always got that musical background. And I must admit, I chose the clarinet purely because Acker Bilk was in the charts playing "Stranger on the Shore." So
Right. Okay.
I thought it was a great instrument. I loved his look. Obviously, later years, I realised I didn't particularly want to emulate his style, but it was great inspiration, actually. And actually, away from sort of the hit parade kind of music that he was known for, he was an incredibly brilliant jazz player.
Okay, cool. So I take it there was lots of music around the house then. Your parents musical as well?
No, not at all.
Right.
My father had a dabble with a drum kit when he was probably in his 40s or so. I remember the drum kit being in the front room, and us kids, beating it and trying to do something with it. My mother wasn't musical at all, but she was very encouraging. So, there was always music in the house, but it generally was my older brothers who preferred kind of rock music and stuff like that. So,
okay, but as you were saying, there was an encouragement then from the parents that if that was something that you wanted to try out, they were going to be supportive of that. Then, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They the children in my family who did carry on, they supported them as much as they could, giving them, when they could afford it, private tuition. And of course, when the schools kicked in, of course, that was the days when you could have a music lesson at school. And of course, these days it's slightly different. It's changed a bit since having music teachers at school.
Yeah. It's not really high up on the agenda for some schools, is it? It's kind of, I know that for me, whenever I was growing up, I had music lessons in school up until about second year. What's that? Year 8, year 9. And then after that, there was no provision for music whatsoever in the school that I was in. But yet there are some schools here in Northern Ireland, I'm sure the same in terms of England and beyond, where music's an integral part of the curriculum. It's just not the same for all schools.
I'm not entirely sure whether it's the same, but I do hear from my customers that come in with instruments that I look after. It's a constant thing. There's no music in the schools unless the parents really push for it.
Right. Okay.
The school can afford, a peripatetic teacher to come in, but as a general rule, it does seem that the basic understanding of music is kind of forgotten in a lot of schools, which I think is a huge shame because, as we know, it's a major part of our lives.
And it's what it adds to your life as well, Pete, isn't it? In terms of, not just the enjoyment, but the sense of achievement, and how that, for me, how an instrument plays a part in my own kind of mental health and being able to cope with certain things, that being able to reach for an instrument's a way of dealing with stress, a way of, kind of being able to just express how I'm feeling at that time. And it's so much more than just learning how to play an instrument. There's a whole set of life skills that come with playing an instrument, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. There is. I do exactly the same. If I'm feeling stressed, I've got a music room that I can disappear off and pick an instrument up, and it can sound terrible, but I can come out of there half an hour later, and I'm lost without that sort of sense of just that little bit of escape, that little bit of time where I can play an instrument and not think about what's been going on today. And it's so important. It really is.
And it would be great if schools could kind of pick up on that, in regards to, but again, I know that, budget restraints and all sorts of other, focuses in regards to school and achievement, maybe pushes it further down the agenda for some. I know there's, they've got leaderboards, performance indicators, all sorts of stuff, and I suppose that the key aspect of most schools' focus is make sure kids leave with 5 to 8 GCSEs, a grade A to C, and make sure their Ma's English and Science is part of that. It kind of changes the focus away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does. I mean, as a small example, a friend of mine, his son wasn't doing particularly well in school. He wasn't academic at all, and they took him for tests and everything to find out, is there something wrong with him? But actually, it turned out he was artistic.
Right. Okay.
And he took up a musical instrument, and he took to it like a duck to water. So it's just that finding what he was, where his niche was, and it wasn't in academia. Yeah,
and I suppose that's a really great way of putting it as well, isn't it? You talked about artistic there, and being able to find out what that young person's need or a person's need actually is in terms of their ability to express themselves or the ability to engage. Because young people, young adults get written off because they don't fit the mold of, oh, you're not smart according to this particular curriculum. However, there's talent and skill within that person, and it's just given an opportunity to find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the other things you talked about there was you'd made a conscious decision when you went the audition at the was it the Royal School of Music or something, was it there?
Royal College of Music in London.
Royal College of Music, and you encountered players of a higher level than yourself. What was that experience like? Because obviously you were able to get in. When you passed your audition to get in, was there? Did that happen for you gradually? Were you kind of going, listen, I'm not cutting it here, or what was that experience like for you?
Well, for me, it was almost instant, actually.
Right. Okay.
The level that I thought was a good standard to get into a Saturday orchestra, I was obviously nowhere near. And but in all fairness, the other people who were auditioning were absolutely unbelievably fantastic.
Right. Okay.
And I honestly wouldn't have deserved a place there. But I didn't come away disheartened at all. I actually just came away thinking, okay, I need to think about something else because it's not going to work for me. But it wasn't a period of my time where I thought I was completely, squashed by the whole incident at all.
Sure.
It just made me think laterally. That's all.
Okay. And that's then where obviously you were saying where you started to explore other options of staying in music, which then you landed the job with the oboe makers. What was that like in terms of, walking up from the experience of I play an instrument to I've now decided to try and find a job making instruments? What was the apprenticeship like for you?
Well, actually, the apprenticeship was not an apprenticeship. That was the beauty of working for Howard. The boss there, they took you as you were, and if you looked like you were doing well, they would move you on to another process. So you eventually work through the entire process of making an oboe, from taking a piece of wood right up to the key making and then putting the pads in. A lot, and because you have that full experience, there are areas where you feel more comfortable in. And I was actually more comfortable with the key making side of things.
Right. Okay.
So that's one of the areas that that I like to think that I do well in, and it's something that I've carried on throughout my career.
Yeah. No, and where did the whole idea of flutes and stuff come from? Because obviously I want to talk to you a bit about the flutes that you make, in terms of the B flat flutes that we're aware of here in the Northern Ireland band scene. But how did you end up getting involved in that, what was your kind of like first introduction to the band scene here in Northern Ireland?
My first introduction was actually through bands not being able to find people to repair their instruments.
Right, okay.
So I don't know how it happened, but every now and again I'd get a call from a guy and say, you know, we've got 20 flutes. We've nowhere to get them fixed, and we've heard that you could look after them. So I started looking after a few bands' flutes. I think one of the first bands was Newton Ards. They used to send me all their old Miller Wickses.
Okay.
So I think that was my first introduction to actually seeing the flutes. I didn't even really know what they were, to be perfectly honest. I just thought they were little flutes, and they were B flat. I had no idea whatsoever about the scene or anything like that. But hey, these flutes kept turning up, and I was repairing them, so it was okay. That was fine.
Okay, so then you got a wee bit of word of mouth. Then, if you were obviously doing a good job with, you know, sorting the flutes out, the other, like the likes of those bands they were obviously passing your name on to people, and that kind of grew into something else. Then,
yeah, it did. I got a call from the guys at Miller Wicks.
Right.
They had just purchased all the equipment from Johnny Wicks.
Right.
Which turned up in their workshop, and I gather it was a bundle of stuff, and they kind of had not the best idea of how to put the stuff together. I mean, I know Paul well. It's no secret, but Paul contacted me and said, "This is too crazy. We can't do this. Can you help us out?" So they came over to my workshop in Norfolk, and we talked through the design of the original design, and we talked about how you know, it would be possible for people to put the instruments together in a more with less skill. Let's put it that way. You know,
right? Okay.
Because I eventually designed a set of keys for them, which could allow them to put the instruments together from their own workshops.
Okay. Yeah, because they took over what used to be what was called Miller Wicks London, isn't that right? They took over
That's right.
that business there. Because I remember I had a very intricate covered key flute from Miller Wicks London that had a very strange system. And attached, it was closer to a boom system than it was to the simple system that we're used to. And what I found was that my the C key and then the sort of the B flat key or whatever, there wasn't enough space in between them, and they kept catching on each other.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to sending that flute off to get fixed. I don't know, about 20 times before I sold it. So, but thankfully the some of the cover key flutes that are available today are a lot easier to use than those things. So that was your first one of your first introductions was, so bands were asking you to fix flutes, and then Miller Wicks from Kilkeel asking you for a wee bit of help in regards to setting their own workshop up in terms of production methods and so on. And then were you starting to be aware of what the bands were like and stuff after, you know, what bands were there, what they were doing, or how did that develop?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
Again, word had obviously got around, and I was contacted by a gentleman called Brian Crossett, who is or was with Sir George White Memorial Band.
Right, okay.
And he phoned me up and said, you know, could you design and make a flute which is like the Crown AZ? Right. So I said, I don't know anything about them. Thank you very much for your interest. And that was it. Well, the next month he phoned me again.
Right.
And said, have you thought about it? And I said, yeah, I have. And the answer still, I don't know anything about these flutes. So this went on for 6 months, actually.
Right, okay.
So eventually he beat me down, and I said to him, look, I tell you what, I'll have a look at these instruments. and I'll make a batch of 5.
Right.
And the 5, I knew that a batch of 5 would cover my cost just for making all the masters and the patterns, and maybe some of the reamers. And I said that even if they're not very good, you're going to have to buy them because I'm investing a lot of time and effort into this. And he was absolutely convinced. He said they'll be fine. They'll be great.
Right.
So I did a lot of research, and Brian sent me some instruments to measure and what have you. And I made 5 instruments. Well, I sent the first one out to Sir George White, and from that first instrument, they ordered 32 straight off.
Right. Wow.
So that's how it all started. I mean, again, the word got out, and Omar ordered 21 straight away. Kenny Porter contacted me and said, we've heard about these flutes, we'll have some. So it was great, and it basically it went on from there.
Brilliant. So obviously you were like you had to be. I mean, obviously it took you a wee bit of time to kind of as you say, they grind you down to come into this, because the Crown IZ is almost like the holy grail of B flat flutes, isn't it? I mean, it's the model that people want to replicate all the time. So did they end up sending you some Crown IZs, or did you get a hold of any to kind of see what they were like, and did you, or what way did you go about researching that?
I'm not sure where the Crown IZs came from. They may have come from Sir George White, but I mean, I had the Crown IZ. Rudolf Kant actually made a B flat flute as well. So I measured a few, and the interesting thing about the Crown IZs were they were all different. They're a good Crown IZs, and there are really, really terrible Crown IZs as well.
Okay.
I mean, the ones that worked the best were actually the ones that obviously weren't played that much because they're in such fantastic condition.
Okay.
The ones that were had so much wear on them, they've kind of blown out really, but they've still got the name, you see, and this is what the players are after. They see the name, but I do say, don't be fooled by the name. Give the flute a play, because some of them are really, really not good at all. But
is that the only factor, Pete? Is that the only factor in terms of how the wear and tear that the flute has taken? Are there other things that make a good Crown IZ and a bad Crown IZ?
I think it is almost entirely the wear and tear.
Okay.
Because the embouchure hole kind of gets blown out, and it loses that crispness to it. So you lose the edges. So it means when you're striving for that high A or that high F, you really got to work for it, because it just doesn't want to pop out, because everything about the embouchure has become rounded over. And I know a lot of players can still do it because they've owned their flutes for 20, 30 years. So they know the flute inside out. But there are better flutes out there. That's all I can say.
Right. Okay. You're setting the cat amongst the pigeons there, Peter.
I know. Hey, I just make them,
Okay, so obviously you start making flutes for some bands, whatever else. You've obviously been that's hopefully has led you maybe checking out some parades and stuff. Then you've been over here watching some of the bands and things. What kind of how did you find that, or how did that all come about for you?
Well, I came over to holiday in Northern Ireland. I think I was really trying to find the dates, but it's about 2007, 2008. And I happened upon the Black Saturday parade.
Right, okay.
And that was when I was really, truly gobsmacked at how many bands there were. I'd been talking to some of the band guys, and the guys who'd been buying the flutes, and said, you should come over here and see the bands. There's lots of them. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, whatever. But I was actually really really shocked at the amount of bands there were. I mean, accordion bands, pipe bands, and obviously the flute bands as well. It was literally just one band after another. You know, this cacophony of sound that you can hear in the distance until a band is nearly opposite you, and then you can hear the tune that they're playing, and then they go, and it was absolutely fascinating. It was an absolute eye opener, and I think that's when I realised, hey, this market is quite big, actually.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I mean, people. That's the other thing is people don't realise just how big the marching band scene is here in Northern Ireland. You know, I mean, you think about the size of this place. I mean, we have a population here of just shy of 2 million people.
Yeah.
You know, and in the midst of that, there are, in terms of, you know, the tradition that I come from, there's something like between 620 and 650 bands across all of those genres that you're mentioning, and that's thousands upon thousands of people who are involved every week in making music as part of a marching band. And you know, one of the other guys that we'd spoken to was Stu Warmington, you know, from the British Drum Company. And when he said when he came over, he went to his first parade here was one in a place called Market Hill, and he said like he had never seen anything like it in his life, because I think on that's one of the biggest, you know, local parades of the year, and I think there was maybe like 100 bands out at this parade, and it's like kind of going, how do I not know anything about this? You know, as an ex-Royal Marine, how do I not know that this is going on and all these bands are in existence? It does kind of blow people away.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I found amazing, obviously, I knew a couple of the guys in some of the bands. The other thing that really surprised me was the sense of community with all the bands. Now, I know there may be some personal gripes with some of the bands, but as a general rule, you know, all the bands seem to be friendly to each other. Obviously, there is an element of competition because there's generally a best band of the day kind of trophy going around, and it's great to win it, I suppose. But I was really shocked at, you know, you hear these stories about, you know, Northern Ireland and the Troubles and people, you know, and when I see the band scene, it's kind of, it's not there. All these troubles are not there at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a very friendly community.
Yeah. What was it that highlighted that for you personally? Was it things that you were observing, or was it just the fact that you had these relationships with guys in the bands that you kind of think, oh my goodness, this is just amazing? What was it you were seeing that kind of gave you that idea that there's a real sense of community amongst the bands?
I think it was the fact that you know, I did know a couple of the guys. And the first thing they did was introduce me to some more people, you know, and introduce me to some other band leaders. You know, there wasn't this sort of like, oh, you know, this guy's come over here to sell flutes, huh? You know, it was actually, you know, this guy wants to make flutes, and we should encourage it, and you know, come and meet some guys. And that's what surprised me. Certainly in the industry that I've worked in before with oboes and clarinets, you know, it's all secrets. You know, you don't tell anybody about anything. But with the band scene, I feel that it's a lot more open.
Yeah, no, going back a few years, there would have been a lot more of a rivalry, you know, where people, well, it wouldn't have been around instruments and stuff, but it would have been around keeping your tunes a secret, you know, so the melody bands would have kept their tunes. Some people would have kept their tunes to themselves, you know, and don't let on that we're learning this tune. We don't want anybody else to know that we're learning this. I really kind of go, but these tunes are, you know, readily available to all sorts of people. It's not like they know they're brand new or whatever, you know. But there was that element. I remember that whenever I was one of the bands I was in at first, and the first year that we learned a tune called a march called the Queen of Battle, and it was like, keep it a secret. don't even play this anywhere. You know, make sure your windows are closed at home, you know, so that nobody hears that we're playing this tune. So it was that kind of thing. But when it came to things like instruments and where you get stuff and uniforms and all that kind of thing, people would, oh yeah, go to such and such, they're really good, or you know, talk to this person because they've got some great contacts in regards to that. But that's all changed now as well. You know, like you're saying, there's a real sense of openness, you know, right across the whole of the scene. It's like, how can we get better? Well, we know somebody who might be able to help.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, I've been over to the Lisbon competition three or four times, and I also go to the Shankill Road one at the end of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, the bands, you know, melody. It seems that the people who want my flutes mostly are the melody bands. And you know, they're quite competitive in that way, like you say about the you know, the tunes and making sure that they've got the edge over somebody else. But I mean, that's healthy competition. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I always talk about it on the podcast, but iron sharpens iron. You know, that, you know, people, you know, get motivated when they hear a band doing so well. And some of the bands here have really stretched, you know, what the flute can actually do here. You know, I think of the likes of the William King, the Pride of Ballinron, you know, really pushing, you know, the flutes to the limits, you know, of what they can actually do with them. You know, one of the things that really always impresses me about William King is that they don't use anything else other than B flat flutes, but the range of parts that they have and the tone that they're able to generate from their instruments to cover that wide, you know, musical spectrum in terms of covering what would be considered a bass part, F parts, or, you know, other things, just from a set of B flats is outstanding.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. I think they use entirely Crown AZs, don't they, as well?
I'm not 100% sure. I think there's the possibility. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn and say that they're using instruments that they're not. There's not too many bands here have a full set of Crown AZs, you know what I mean? And one of them actually isn't a melody band. That's one of the bands that does have a full set of Crown AZs here is the White Rock.
Okay.
The White Rock, they have a full set of Crown AZs. They're one of the, as I say, one of the few bands that I know of that actually do have a full set of them and stuff there. So I'm not 100% sure what flutes the William King are sporting, but whatever they're playing, they do it bloody well. So talk to me a wee bit about the bands and the musicians that you provided instruments for here in Northern Ireland, because you obviously started off with one, and I'm sure it hasn't stayed that way. I'm sure you're providing for quite a number of bands. So who are you providing for?
So George White, they've actually taken two sets. They're one of the only bands that is now playing concert pitch B flats.
Right. Okay.
And this came about because they want to interact with other musicians, not just the drums.
Yeah.
So they commissioned me to make I suppose what you would call low pitch, because obviously all the flutes that the bands play are at 452.5, which is technically high pitch, which is super high, really.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that you can't play with other instruments particularly easily.
Yeah.
Mostly that's not an issue, for a lot of bands, but occasionally, some of the bands want to integrate with other musicians. Omar, of course, Ken Castle.
Right. Okay.
You'll have to excuse my pronunciation, but is it Skeg? Skeg?
Skeg. It depends. They'll answer to anything, to be honest with you. So
Okay,
some people call them skew or Skeg, as far as I'm aware. It's Skeg, as far as I know.
Clocker, Star of the Road, Ballynafaid, Derry Oak, Len Big Orange and Blue, Ballynahinch, Stranokum, Lisbon Fusiliers, Castle Dawson, Hounds of Ulster. They're the ones who've taken multiples.
Right.
A lot of bands will just take the piccolo.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously piccolos are quite hard to find in decent condition,
Yeah.
and the tuning of them is kind of actually the
It's hit and
tuning
miss,
is,
isn't it? It's hit and miss.
well, let's put it this way: the tuning is about as crazy as the guys who want to play it, the guys and girls who want to play it.
Said nothing. Said nothing.
Well, I mean, the piccolo players, they're the good ones. They are prima donnas, and so they should be, because they've got a tough job.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, and a good piccolo player makes it seem effortless, don't they? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't. You don't feel like you're struggling with it, and they've got a great way of being able to blend with the rest of the band rather than overtake and stuff. And that for me is always the sign of a great piccolo player, is that it's not overpowering it. They can play in a way that blends with the rest of what's being performed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've also provided for Scottish bands as well. I mean, you've got the Saracen Flute Band, Pride of the North, Cambuslang. I think there's 2 bands in Cambuslang. I think
there's the Volunteers, and then there's another group in Cambuslang as well.
Yeah, they've both taken my flutes, which is great. They got Shield Hill and Blackridge Thistle. Again, they're the bigger bands that have taken the instruments. I mean, quite often individuals will buy their own flutes, you know, because they feel that maybe the flute they've been given is not really what they want, so they buy their own flutes. So there's a lot of other guys who have bought flutes as well. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. It goes in fits and starts, because when I was extremely busy with making B flats, at one stage I made over 100.
Right. Okay.
You know, that's and for just myself in my workshop, you know, that's quite some going.
It is indeed.
But you know, it's kind of cooled down a bit now, and the guys who've got my flutes, you know, they hang on to them for a while, which is fine. Maybe bands have to look into funding and what have you to get full sets of flutes, but I mean, that suits me. I mean, because you know, it was great to start with, but I'm not sure I want to make 100 flutes every year now.
No, especially if it's just you. You know what I mean? That's
it.
You know, I mean, that's a serious amount of work there. Peter, just rolling back there, you talked a bit about, you know, this concert pitch B flat, you know, with the lower pitch thing. Talk me through what's the main difference between that flute and what's considered to be the high pitch flute? Because I know the high pitch flute, technically, while it's called a B flat, am I right in saying that it's not really in the key of B flat? It's kind of, is it those higher pitch? Are they closer to like A than B flat, or what way does that work? Why does a high pitch flute not blend in with other instruments?
Because of the yeah, okay, that's an interesting question. Okay, standard concert pitch, which all orchestras will play to, is now basically 440 hertz to 442.
Right. Okay.
So the high pitch instruments are 452. So that basically just makes them high. It's still, you know, the note is still the same. It's still B flat, but it's probably on a concert scale. It's only just a B flat, like you say. It's closer to an A than it is a B flat.
Okay.
But I mean, historically, this has always been the case with marching instruments, and brass bands were the same. It was just believed that, you know, having the higher pitch would make the instruments sing out better.
And then the lower pitch, obviously it's closer to the exact note that you're, you know, so than the higher pitch is, so that it means that, as you're saying, then with a wider range of instruments, then you can play. It's easier to play alongside those instruments, because I know I've heard of some bands that they were looking to play along with sort of like brass bands and stuff, and some bands were getting either their, you know, the the board extended or something, or that the flute was being extended in length and stuff in order to fit in with it. Is that's a normal process, or what's the
No,
story
it's
there?
not a normal process, but it is something that can kind of work, especially when you've got 3-piece instruments where you can pull the head out. The only problem is the head's virtually falling out before you can actually get it to pitch. And
Right.
The problem with an instrument that's designed for one pitch but wants to try another is it's always a compromise. So you might get the bottom end to tune in beautifully, but as soon as you start going into the second register, it's kind of going all over the place.
Right. Okay.
So ultimately, one size doesn't fit all. You've either got a high pitch instrument or a low or a constant pitch instrument.
Brilliant. So talk us through the range of flutes that you make, because obviously you do, you don't just do one particular flute. You've a range of flutes that are available. What ones are available that bands might be able to buy or be interested in?
Yeah, obviously the B flat, the flagship model for me is my own crown instrument, sort of named in respect of the original crown. I also make a coronet as well, which is just a 2-piece instrument, so it hasn't got the adjustable tuning slide, and it hasn't got a lined head as well. But it works off exactly the same bore. It's not, it's made with the same precision, the same tooling as the crown, except that it's a 2-piece instrument. Sometimes some of the guys ask me if I can just do 3 keys on them. I think one band even asked just for 2, but in the end, they're just the 5-key coronet flute. So that's the B flat range, and then I've got the piccolo as well.
Right.
The F flute, excuse me, the F flute. That's the one that I really think is, for me, as a non B flat flute player, the F flute is the closest for me that comes to like playing a concert type flute. And I've actually done quite a lot of work on the F flute to get the embouchure a lot better, bigger in size, so you can get more volume to the note. Because the problem with the bass flute and the F flute was that they were just sort of sleeping in the background, weren't they?
Yeah.
So you need an instrument that can actually sort of punch above its weight, as it were. So I feel that the F flute that I've developed, the head joint on it is one of the best head joints on the whole range of the instruments.
Yeah.
I also make the bass flute, but to be perfectly honest, I think I've sold 2 or 3 of them.
This is the B flat bass flutes then, yeah?
Yeah, that's a B flat bass.
A B flat bass, yeah, that's what I was saying. A B flat bass,
yeah. Somebody did ask me for the E flat bass, which is kind of in between, but I kind of thought, well, I'd probably only sell 3 of those in my life. So these are rare beasts that occasionally come out of the closet when somebody's got some part music for it. But as a general run-of-the-mill instrument, I don't think they see the light of day too often.
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's too many bands playing that full range of flute. I think if you're going anything in terms of multiple flutes, you're really looking at it's B flat, piccolo, and Fs is really as far as it goes for most bands these days, rather than, as I say, including the B flat bass and including the E flat bass as well. There, it's definitely. But it's interesting you mentioned that there, because I actually picked up one of the Crown F flutes there not that long ago, and the difference that I found in playing it, and I had this old F flute that I had picked up. I don't even know who made it, but what I found was that what you were talking about there was the embouchure on the older one that I had, that I don't know the make of, was a bit thinner, a bit shorter, and it wasn't as wide. And when you get down to the bottom end, when you're playing in that low, that bottom register, and it just sounded really wispy and not really full at all. Whereas the flute that I've just got, I literally got it about a month ago, and you can tell the difference straight away, and that, especially in that really low bottom end, you can tell that it'll sit a bit differently in regards to alongside other flutes.
Yeah, I think flute making has kind of moved on. I mean, I've seen it with concert flutes. I make concert head joints as well. And when I first started making them sort of 30 years ago, the height of the actual lip plate, we call it the chimney and the riser, that tended to be less than 5 millimeters. And now virtually every maker makes them over 5 millimeters. Now, this is also due to the fact that players have got a lot better as well. Because having a lower chimney height means the instrument can be quite sweet, but it lacks power. But the problem with a very high chimney is that it's got loads of power, but it takes a lot to control it, and that's the difference. And as players have got better, they can control it so much better, and they can get very good high end as well as a really punchy bottom end to the flute as well. And I think this is reflected with even marching flutes, and that's one of the things I've tried to carry on with my own F flute, is using what I've learned from the concert flute head making and transferring it over to the marching flutes as well.
Yeah, because you have you don't just have the two piece and then the cornet. You also have another B flat that you have, which is a bit more, that it has a lip plate on it as well, doesn't it? So because I know you have a straight head and then you have one with the lip on it as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In actual fact, that is the go-to flute now. Whereas before, I call them the traditional head, which is kind of the straight cylinder with the embouchure hole, and then I've got the lip plate type head. Now, I did that originally because when Sir George White asked me to make an instrument, I thought, well, let's not copy something exactly. Let's try and move it on a bit. So that's why I created that. It's something I do with my own wooden concert head joints anyway. So I thought, well, okay, we'll try and get a little lip plate on there as well. And again, that adds to the sound. It also gives you your lips a very firm place to go. Because I mean, when you've just got a cylinder to approach, where's the embouchure hole? Is it here? Is it there? Who knows? So I think that also makes my flute distinctive in its look as well. There are a lot of bands guys who go, oh yeah, they're playing Pete Worrell flutes, because it's obvious,
Yeah, though there's an element of that, and I think what you're saying there as well is that it can help with people's technique content. With that, the lip plate on that can help people with their technique in terms of playing. Whereas sometimes without it, like you're saying, is your embouchure can, because of the nature of a marching band, you're not going to hit the exact same spot all the time every time you're lifting and putting the flute. And sometimes the lip plate with that helps with that positioning, doesn't it?
Yeah, I hope it does. Certainly, I find playing concert flute, because I played flute for many years, and it just comes natural to you, to put your bottom lip on the embouchure on the actual lip plate itself. So I just thought, why not? Why shouldn't these marching flutes have it as well?
Yeah. Cool. The other thing that you have is one of the flutes that you have with your top range is you've got some intricate key work done on some of them, don't you? There's some people there's the straight normal keys, and then you've the one with there's like an engraving kind of thing on them as well. Has that come from the oboe days of crafting nice keys and having something? Where did that all the inspiration for the decorative keys come from?
Well, actually, that comes from a history of flute making.
Right.
If you go back many years, talking about concert flutes of years ago, the flute playing back in the day was a gentleman's pastime,
Right.
and gentlemen wanted to show off to the ladies, that they could play the flute, but also they wanted a beautiful instrument. So it was quite common to have to see engraved keywork, very, very fancy keywork. And somebody approached me and said, can you do some engraving?
Right.
And I thought, well, why not? It could look quite neat. So I actually commissioned the first one I did, and that's actually on my website. Some pictures of that. I commissioned a qualified engraver to do that work, and he just took some simple thumbnail sketches from me and he elaborated it. But subsequently, I've been able to do my own. We call it diamond drag engraving. Okay, so I need a template and what have you. But I make all that stuff. So I can do very simple engraving. It's not uncommon for ex-military men to come to me and ask for their squad number or whatever. They actually want them on the bands and stuff like that. Or quite common is their army nickname. Is they quite like that as well. So yeah, I do a bit of engraving. It's not my forte, but sometimes the effects can be really good.
No, I think it's quite a striking looking flute. I mean, obviously, having looked at your website, and I was to say, I ordered a flute from you not that long, a wee while ago, and I was like kind of contemplating where it was for me. It was like going, I need something quick, and you were able to turn it around pretty quickly for me, which I really appreciate. And then I was like looking at the ones with the engraved keys, like going, that'd be brilliant. But I was like kind of going, I just want something, I need something quickly because I need something to fit in with the band that I'm playing with, you know what I mean? So, but they do look absolutely fantastic, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, they do look, especially the first one. In actual fact, I can't beat the first one that was engraved by a professional engraver. I mean, it's just head and shoulders above what I can do. He is just another artist in engraving, and he is absolutely brilliant at what he does. But like all these things, it comes at a cost. You got to pay for his work, and he's very good, so he's quite popular as well.
Well, that's it. But there's that old saying is you get what you pay for. You know what I mean? If you pay £60-70 for your flute, don't expect to get too much for it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. What makes a quality flute for you? And I suppose the other thing that we're maybe touching on there, Peter, is we've already touched on a wee bit, but what makes your stuff stand out? So what makes a quality flute from your perspective, and what makes your flute stand out from the rest?
I think what makes a quality flute for me, not necessarily one that I've made, but one that actually has a character of its own. Has the ability for you to put your own character in the instrument, has got a forthright sound, because the idea that people want a lovely, beautiful, sweet sounding flute is great, but the reality is when you're in a band, and I used to be in a jazz band playing flute, is you need to stand out. So you've got to have that attack from the head joint. So I think for me, that's what I was looking for when I was trying to create a marching flute, is that it had the ability to blend in, but it also has the ability to stand out as well. So someone can push it, but also just step back as well. When it comes to what actually makes a decent flute, I think you can't really beat African blackwood as the material of choice. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other materials which produce a sound, but I think for consistency, African blackwood really does take some beating. I've made several other concert piccolos, simple system concert piccolos out of different woods: tulip wood, boxwood, wood called Mopani, and they're all great, and they all have their own sound, but they don't have that sort of quality that African blackwood has. So, I mean, that is why it is still the wood of choice for virtually all woodwind instruments, clarinets, oboes, flutes still. So I think that makes a huge difference. The fact that I line the head with silver as well, I personally think it makes a difference. I know that the Millowicks guys, they use nickel silver and brass. It produces a sound which I hope is distinctive for them, but it's not a sound that I personally I like the sound of silver.
Right.
Because I've come from a flute, concert flute playing background. I like the resonance that silver gives me. Nickel silver is really good. It's super bright as well. So if that's what you're looking for, then maybe that's what you need to go for. Brass is kind of in between the two, in between silver and nickel silver. So there is, again, there's not one size that fits all. If the sound appeals to you, then there's no reason not to buy it purely because I want this one that's got silver in it. But it might not be the sound that you're after. That's the thing.
Yeah. And the other thing is that there's there's requirements that need to be made for the importing of the blackwood, isn't there? Is there something? There's regulations and stuff that about how much you can bring in and how it's stored and all this kind of stuff, isn't there? There's a lot more to it than just meets the apple here. Listen, I'll just go and order some Indian blackwood here. It's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it?
No, it's not too bad now. Actually, it was a little while ago. About 5 years ago, there was this thing called CITES on all African blackwoods.
Right. Okay.
Purely because it was in the Dalbergia family. Now, Dalbergia also covers rosewoods. Now, certain rosewoods were very, very endangered. But it then turned out that Dalbergia melanoxylon, which is African blackwood, isn't actually endangered at all. I mean, in places like Tanzania where it's grown, they use it as firewood.
Right. Okay.
So it's maybe a misconception that it's a rare wood. It's not rare. It's actually forested. They actually plant it. The difference is that the crop takes 60 years to mature.
Right. Okay.
So one family may only see one mature crop in its life, but they do carry on, and it is a farmed material. You can now really only buy African blackwood through a particular source now.
Right. Okay.
It's got to have the right certification to it. So any blackwood that comes into the country now has to be certified. So it's not as though you can sort of pick it up on the cheap or whatever. There's no way around that now. So which is a good thing, because hopefully it means that the people who are selling it are getting a fair price for their wood. And the suppliers and that are down the chain, and everybody's happy, hopefully.
Yeah. No, and in terms of whenever you get it, can you use it straight away, or do you have to have? Is there a process that you have to go through with the wood before you start turning it into flutes?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This is the bit that if you're in a big company, the accountants don't like. And I know from experience, the company I used to work for, we would buy wood up to 10 years in advance of using it. And you buy a quantity of wood every year. So you've always got 10 years worth of stock in. Okay. And you can't really use it for another 3 or 4 years. Now, I've actually just bought some wood. Now, I know that's been rested for 5 years, but that's going to be sitting in my cupboard doing nothing for another 3. Well, I say doing nothing. It's maturing. It's settling. It's aging. The problem with working wood that's fresh is it wants to move everywhere.
Right.
And
Okay.
you do not want that. You want the stability that African blackwood can give you. So yeah, it's gonna be a little while before those instruments, those blocks of wood in my storage, actually get turned into flutes. But I do the same thing as the larger companies, just on a smaller scale. I try to
Yeah.
buy wood every 2 to 3 years in enough quantities to guesstimate how many instruments. I mean, it's not just. I mean, you imagine it's not just marching flutes that I'm making. So I'm buying various lengths of wood and different billet sizes for the other instruments that I'm making. Yeah, you really do not want to start messing with the wood straight away.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose that's another thing. Whenever people, you hear people talk, oh, it's going to take such and such a time for, an order of flutes to come in. That all has to be weighed up, doesn't it, in terms of what they have available here that is going to be good to work for, that's going to create the quality instrument. And yet sometimes, like you said, you had 100 in a year or whatever else, and the demand that sometimes can be there for flute making, and people don't understand. Well, listen, this isn't just as straightforward as how long do I pull this piece of blackwood off the shelf here and I'll just make you a flute. There is a heck of a lot more to it, and then obviously you're crafting your own keys, etc., aren't you? You're making your own keys and everything. So it's a real kind of artisan process, I suppose, that you're going through to create an individual instrument.
Yeah, it certainly is. You've got to. I mean, certainly with the wood is the biggest headache. Not obtaining it or working it. It's actually working out how many instruments that you kind of guess will be sold that year. So how many instruments you want to prep. I mean, years have gone by where I've prepped up 200-300 sets of joints and maybe sold 50 or 60 instruments. Well, that's okay, because it means that the wood has been prepped and it's got longer to sit. And the thing about working most woods, and certainly African blackwood, is you can't do everything in one go.
Right.
So the first stage that I would actually do would be it comes in a square billet. Okay. We call them billets. It's a rectangle of wood. So that's put on the lathe and it's made round. It's just a cylinder. And then I put a small hole through the middle, maybe 4 or 5 millimeters, basically no bigger than the smallest part of the bore. And then that will sit on the shelf for another year.
Right.
Yeah. So then the following year, I'll grab that lot and then I'll start making the bore to the actual size that I need. But I'll make sure it's slightly undersized because I don't want to go crazy. So taking away material on the inside of the instrument means it's exposing a larger surface area. So you've got the outside surface area and the inside now. So more air can get to it, but you don't want the air getting to it too quickly or any moisture leaving it too quickly. So again, it goes back in the cupboard for another year.
Right.
And this process continues for about 4 years until we actually get a joint which is ready to use. But once they've gone through that stage, they can sit at that stage for years and years and years. But it's just that initial 2-3 years. You've got to treat the wood with some respect. Even then, sometimes you do all of that and it still kicks you in the face and cracks and splits and what have you. But hey, that's what happens when you work with wood.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And at the end of the day, when you think about it, I mean, you're trying to kind of craft it into something that you want to have, and the wood can sometimes be going, you have no chance. Yeah. It's not happening.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we get asked a lot about, and I suppose one of the reasons whenever I was trying to think of new episodes for this season, people were asking about flute care. And it's one thing, there's lots of different opinions in regards to what's the best way to look after your flute. What would you say is a good care regime for a flute, and what things should maybe people avoid in terms of doing with their flute?
Yeah, okay. Let's look at things to avoid in general. Anyway,
Uh-huh.
a lot of guys don't put cork grease on. There's only one cork joint on your instrument. Just put a bit of grease on it, guys and girls, because it'll keep that cork nice and fresh. Always use cork grease, not Vaseline. Vaseline will kill the glue underneath, and then your cork will just fall off, which is even worse. If your cork becomes loose and you still need to carry on and you can't get to a repairer, PTFE tape is brilliant.
Right. Okay.
Don't use insulation tape, please, or sellotape. But PTFE is pretty good because you can actually just unwind it, and then when someone wants to repair the cork, it just comes off instead of this sticky gooey mess which electrical tape leaves, or gaffer tape. That was one of the worst ones I've seen.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, look after your cork. If you feel so inclined to oil your instrument, and I say this with caution because I've seen a lot of instruments that have been oiled. I mean, I've seen instruments where guys and girls have dipped the entire instrument, pads, keys, everything, in linseed oil and just let it drip dry.
Oh.
Okay. If you buy one of my crowns, it comes with its own cleaning rod. Now, the reason I provide a cleaning rod is because I haven't managed to source one that's the right size, and it's just the one I make is just the right size to pull through the bore with a very small rectangle of cloth on it. Now, what you should do is have one just to swab out to clean the water out. That's your clean one. And then another one that you keep entirely just for a tiny bit of oil, bit of bore oil on there. And you keep that in a little bag. And when you want to give it a bit of feed, just swap the cloth over and then just pull it through. What you're looking for inside your bore is just a very, very small sheen of oil. And you can see it through the holes, the finger holes. If you see droplets, it's too much. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So you just want a very light sheen over the on the inside of the instrument. Leave it overnight to soak in, and then with another clean cloth, clean out the excess. You don't want the oil that's in there to dry or because it'll start clogging.
Right.
If you want to, I actually sell my own bore oil. Others are available, some of them very good. Used to be a thing where guys and girls would be putting linseed oil in. That used to be a thing. We kind of don't do that now. It builds up on the inside of the bore, and it just changes the shape of the bore and the sound and everything.
Yeah.
So if you want to use an oil, I use lemon oil. That's the one that I sell. It's very clean. It's antibacterial. It's really thin, so it gets in that wood, and that's what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is not stop the water getting into the wood. You're actually trying to just slow it down.
Sure.
You won't stop, because you're breathing down it all the time.
Yeah.
You're never going to stop that water vapor getting into that wood. But what you're trying to do is just slow it down and allow that water to evaporate and dry off. Wood doesn't mind being wet, but it eventually wants to be dry.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. If you're worried about your getting oil on your pads, what you can do is cut up some very small pieces of tin foil,
right,
about 40 millimeters square.
Right. Okay.
And then put it underneath the pad. So lift the key, put it underneath the pad, just ball it up so that so it basically contains the pad. So it means that the oil does not go on the pad. Don't get oil on the pad, please. because they'll just need changing, because the oil will just harden the leather. So if you're worried about getting oil on the pads, just wrap a bit of cling film or a bit of tin foil around each pad and then oil the instrument. Tuning slide, pretty straightforward. Just give it a good wipe. Some people put oil on there. Well, if that works for you, it's okay. It's not going to do it any harm. But technically, they should work dry. And the reason they don't work is normally because they've got a bit of dirt in there. So that's why you just need to clean it off with a clean cloth. Make sure there's no grime in there, and it should actually work dry. But if it needs a bit of oil, that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
If you get a chance to pop the cork out of the head, as long as you know where it goes when you put it back, that's not a bad thing, because a lot of players don't take their corks out. So the head joint, I mean, if you've ever seen inside a lot of these head joints, I mean, I know you guys like a drink, but hey, I mean, I've seen mushrooms in there. It's really quite gross. But if you can, just pop the cork out, clean the inside of the head, get a cotton bud around the inside of the embouchure hole. Do not scrape it, because you're then starting to change the hole.
Yeah, change the tone. Yeah.
So get a cotton bud, just with a bit of clean water, and then just, because what will happen is that will soften the gunge, as it were, and then get another cotton bud to clean it out. Stick the cork back. Like I say, only do that if you know exactly where that cork goes.
Where it goes, yeah.
Because a lot of players don't know where it goes. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, on virtually every marching flute, if you make up a stick with a measurement of 12.4 on it, and then you push your cork in, you push it past you put it in from the top, not the bottom. Put it in from the top, push it past just to the edge of the embouchure hole, and then with your marker stick, push the marker stick up until the line of 12.4 is exactly in the center of the embouchure hole, and that's the position you need. And I think that would be pretty universal for all B flat flutes. I haven't come across one that is slightly different. So 12.4, that's the measurement you need to know.
Dead on. And what about the wood and the keys? How about keeping your wood clean, your keys clean?
Okay, don't oil the outside of the wood. You don't need to. The human body is brilliant at producing its own oils, and that they're very good at actually protecting the instrument. Now, it doesn't hurt to give the outside of the body a little bit of a wipe after you've been playing. That's the best time to actually try and just keep it maintained, because you've got all your human grease and sweat on it, and you can use that to your advantage. Use a cloth like a t-shirt, that's a good material to use, and then just clean everywhere that you can see. Don't try and jam the cloth into tricky little areas. Just give it a good wipe, and that's fine. Key work, well, if you've got an instrument which is just nickel silver, you'll struggle to keep the verdigris off it. You really will. But again, if you use a silver cloth, then that'll clean the key. You don't need to scrub the key. You're literally just wiping it off. The thing about silver cloths is that they are very dusty. So when you get a brand new one, take it outside, give it a really, really good shake, and all the majority of the dust to come up, and then you can start using it. And you just use it just to wipe your keys. And certainly with my own instruments, they're silver plated. So again, use a silver cloth for it, and take it outside, give it a good shake, and then you can start using it. They last for a long time, so you can put it in a sealed bag, and it'll be ready to go for the next time as well.
Brilliant. I appreciate that one. That's good stuff there. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people taking some note on that. And I suppose your thing we were talking prior to this is don't stick all, you were saying linseed oil, don't be sticking olive oil down the flute either. You know, stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, basically anything that you should be using in the kitchen and general woodworking is not what we're after. That's all.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned your bore oil with lemon oil, because that kind of reminds me. I use I'm a guitar player as well, and I have a lemon oil solution that I use for whenever I take the strings of when I'm restringing, and I clean my fretboard down with a lemon oil solution as well. So it's good that you're mentioning that as well. It makes a lot of sense, you know, because I love the smell of it afterwards as well. It's a nice kind of it's a nice kind of setup afterwards. So cool.
Yeah, I think any of the in actual fact, I mean, I personally prefer the lemon oil. I mean, it's got antibacterial properties as well. Especially on like a fingerboard, like you say, it leaves a beautiful sheen to it as well. When it's wet, when it's dry, it doesn't feel sticky at all. So, you know, it's a really good oil. But in actual fact, you know, any of the citrus oils are pretty good at this sort of lubricating thing. I mean, I know guys have used almond oil before, olive oil. I mean, if you're pushed, any oil's better than nothing. But you know, there are shops. That's what they're for. You know, just go and buy the proper stuff. You know.
Brilliant. So one of the other things is, Pete, obviously you've mentioned you make other instruments, and I believe that you've won some awards recently for some of the things that you've made. Is that right?
Yeah, I've won 6 awards actually. This is a competition that's run by the One-Handed Musical Instrument Trust, OMI.
Right.
That was originally set up to basically enable people with hand disabilities, either one hand or lost the use of a hand, or maybe had a stroke, congenital illness, whatever. Basically allow them to continue playing music or actually start music from a young age. So they run a competition every couple of years, and they're looking for musicians, inventors, makers to come up with ideas to get around the problem of, you know, if you've only got the use of one hand, what instruments can you play? The first award that I got was for a descant recorder. That was actually designed over 30 years ago. I did the design. I did the design on that while I worked for somebody else. But so it's great that it's actually now got recognition. I mean, I've been making those for 30 years, you know, in very tiny numbers, really. But hopefully some, you know, people have enjoyed playing them. So it's good that was recognised. The next one was for the bass recorder. Somebody commissioned me to make a bass recorder. So it's a different, it's a big recorder. So there's a lot more keywork to consider. So that was one of the interesting ones to do. And I suppose the one that I'm proudest of is the one-handed clarinet.
Right.
So I actually designed a clarinet which could be played the full range entirely with just one hand. I mean, it's a particularly tricky instrument to make for one hand, because a lot of the woodwind instruments work on an octave, so you can overblow an octave. The clarinet overblows a 12th, so it made it really quite difficult. And that whilst the clarinet itself is a relatively simple instrument, to actually make an instrument one-handed that overblows a 12th was very, very challenging. But I managed to do it, and I'm glad to say, you know, that it was awarded and people have recognised it as an instrument that could be played to a professional standard.
Wow, brilliant. Well done. Well, that sounds amazing. I mean, I can't even contemplate the idea of making my own flute. You never mind making instruments for people with one hand and still trying to stay true to the actual tonal range of the instrument and stuff. That's just a whole other level of stuff from my perspective. You know what I mean? So no, happy days, man. It's good to kind of, that's the other thing, and I think that's really important about the flutes that you make as well, is that you're bringing a lot of experience from a lot of other areas in regards to it's not just one instrument that you're making. You're kind of invested in a lot of different types of instrument, and I suppose those things can't help but influence what you do, in terms of making good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I've been an instrument maker for 40 years. I worked it out this afternoon, actually.
Right.
For 40 years. And I really can say that I actually enjoy getting up in the morning and coming into my workshop. Obviously there's laborious jobs that there's all part of, but I love the design process. I really do. I'm currently involved in 2 or 3 design projects, all musical instruments, which I'm glad to say. So I really do enjoy coming to work. I mean, you couldn't get much better than this. I really do enjoy it, and also You're right, and I like to draw inspiration from other people's instruments as well. I look at a lot of instruments. I've been fortunate to travel to quite a few guys' workshops around the world to see their kind of kit. I'm not talking about sort of stealing ideas. I'm just actually, most of the time, I'm looking for inspiration to see, how they do stuff and the processes they use. Most of the time, I can't actually use any of them because, I'm just me in my workshop on my own. So I've got to think about that. But it's the design process that really intrigues me the most. A lot of the times when I finish the design, because some of the designs take so long to actually get to production, I've almost lost interest, and I'm ready to move on to the next 3.
Oh dear! Well, I suppose when you're waiting for wood to mature for 4 and 5 years, there, I mean, you're might have some level of patience there, but I get that. It's like kind of go, let's get on to something, let's do something. In terms of your flute making, then what's the future hold for you in regards to that? Have you any developments or anything that you're doing new in the pipeline, or is it all let's keep things as it is?
No, there's lots of new stuff coming. There really is. During the lockdown, I was involved in a team, and this was looking at accessibility and disability and what have you. So they looked at my clarinet and said, the thing is, Pete, you've made something great, but it's so expensive that people can't afford it. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. It's just me. I can't make them any quicker. And that's what they cost, I'm afraid. So this team was set up to look at how can we make them cheaper?
Right.
How can we do that? So for the last 2.5 years, we've been looking at the process of manufacture. And I'm really excited by the whole 3D printing.
Right.
thing.
Oh, okay.
So we're actually looking at 3D printing a clarinet and the keywork.
Right.
And, it's now 9 months ago, I would have said it's not possible. But the people on my team, they're very experienced engineers and working with Manchester University. They're very experienced people in their field, a field of which I know very little about, but I do know a lot about it now. And I'm quite excited about the prospect of 3D printing instruments. And obviously there may be a difference. There will be a difference in tonal quality, but I think you've got to think of it in terms of it's not the same, it's different, but can you live with that different?
Right. Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm very excited about the 3D stuff at the moment.
So we're going to see some 3D printed flutes, are we?
That's funny you should say that. Well, I was when I was over in Northern Ireland for one of the competitions, somebody said to me, you know, we got loads of youngsters who want to come along to our band, but even the cheapest flutes, they're not cheap enough, or if they are, they're not very good. And he said it's really unfair to give a youngster a flute that doesn't really work just to try and get them in, because it's going to push them away. So my idea would be to produce something that is economical, but actually is as well thought out as my own instruments themselves. The problem with a lot of the student instruments that I'm seeing for fluters is they just weren't very good in the first place, let alone reproduced. So it's something I think that could potentially happen.
Well, that sounds good, because I know, going back to my days of learning, I mean, the flutes that we got as learners were the dregs. You know, it was like there were bits of there were hybrids. There were bits of other flutes joined together, and a bit of tape around them, or thread around the cork to try and make them stick together and stuff like that. There, and if you were getting a note out of it, you know, you were doing well in terms of that. You know what I mean? So it's great to hear that you're thinking along those lines. I think you're definitely right there. We don't want to be giving young people, you know, substandard instruments to the point where it puts them off doing it. It makes it harder for them to learn. But yet at the same time, we can't, because flutes are expensive. Let's face it. You know what I mean? Generally, you're talking what, 400. So for a decent flute, you're talking 400 plus, aren't you? You know, and I mean, and a lot of bands can't afford to go down that lane, you know, of spending, especially if you're a big band. You know, we've got some massive bands over here, you know, 30, 40 flute players. You know, by the time you spend 300, 400 pound a flute, you know, that's a considerable outlay. And then not take into consideration that you maybe have 10 or 12 people in your learners class. You know, that's quite a financial outlay, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely is. And the thing is, you're absolutely right about the hybrid, well, the mongrel instruments. I mean, I've seen plenty of them come in the workshop. I'm thinking, well, this head's not from here, but you know, it kind of works, but not very well. I mean, that's the other thing, is that, you know, learners need something that's actually going to encourage them.
Yeah.
The last thing they need is a knockback, because, you know, they're being told that they're not good enough, but because they've got no inspiration to actually practice at home because they're finding the instrument difficult to play. I mean, my idea for a student instrument. Okay, let's get back to the basics. It's the key work. The key work is the most time-consuming aspect of flute making, and it's the bit that requires the most skill. So if you can make an instrument with, say, one key or two keys, which gives the juniors a chance to get their embouchure together, get to know where their fingers go, and obviously their little finger on the E flat key, I think that's a really, really good start. And it won't take them too long to manage to pick up the other four keys on the instrument. But it's the transition between a student instrument and the better instruments that they're going to find difficult, purely because the sound of them is going to be so different because they've been given the rubbish instruments. But it'd be great to have a starter instrument that you don't have to change your embouchure for. You can go straight onto a better instrument, and it's all there because you've actually learnt it on your starter instrument. So I think there's a lot to think about, and you know, it is price led. It's you know, like you say, the bands have got. There's a lot of expenditure with a band, as you know. I mean, I was gobsmacked at the price of uniforms, hiring coaches to go to venues, etc. It's big business, really. And you don't always get what you want by going around shaking tins at the parades and what have you. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky business, fundraising. So it would be great to give them a break with a cheaper flute, but good quality. That's what I'm thinking.
Brilliant. Well, listen, that sounds really interesting. So definitely keep us up to speed with how that's going, because I definitely think there'll be people listening in on this, Peter, and thinking that sounds right up our street. So I don't think you'll have any people. You'll not have too many people not knocking your door to try and find out about that whenever you do maybe get around to making that a reality and stuff. So definitely keep us up to speed with that. Maybe just in terms of finishing off then, how do people get a hold of your flutes then? Where can they, you've obviously a website and stuff, so it's shameless plug time, so although we don't want to do it too much because we don't want you getting 100 orders for the year, so.
No, I've got other stuff to do as well. Yeah, of course. The best way to contact me is email. And the best way to get my email address is just to go to my website, which is www.peterworrell.co.uk, and all the information is there. It's the best way to get hold of me, because then I can respond when I'm available. So just drop me an email just to say hello. It's fine. That's not a problem at all.
Excellent. Well, listen, Peter, I want to just say thank you very much for taking the time out to share some of that stuff with us. That's been absolutely fascinating. I'm sitting thinking here, that's an hour and a half, and it feels like we've been talking for 10, 15 minutes. It's been fantastic. And I think for me, being so, interested in the subject matter, I've just found it absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much for taking the time out and being on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it.
You're absolutely welcome, Glenn. I'm glad that the Made to Parade podcast is doing so well. It's it's a thing now. So so you need to carry on. I mean, you've got an army of listeners now. So hopefully they'll find this podcast as entertaining.
I think they will. There's a lot of what we call the flute aficionados here. The people who are really into their instruments and stuff are going to really dig this. And I think even just anyone, there's bits and pieces in this. I think what I might actually do as well, Peter, is I might even cut out the wee section that you've done on flute care and maybe make that a separate video as well as a part of the main podcast as well, just to say, well, listen, if you want to just focus in on this, here's some great tips for looking after your flute, and use that as a resource for the scene as well. So, absolutely brilliant. Well, listen, I'm just going to close the episode out here, and then I'll come back at the end, and we'll have a wee quick outro chat. Well, after I've done the thing here, if you don't mind, and sure. I'll just do that now. Then, all right. So. Folks, there you go. Absolutely fantastic conversation with Peter there. I don't know about you, but I found that absolutely fascinating in terms of the process that making a flute, from the wood and how long it actually takes, the key work, everything that goes into that there is absolutely fantastic. Maybe help us look at our instruments maybe a wee bit differently and look after them maybe a wee bit differently as well, So thanks again to Peter for coming on and sharing all that with us. Absolutely brilliant. Folks, make sure you check out the next episode. I'm not going to tell you who's on it. You'll just have to check out and see when we release it. But, until the next time, look after yourselves and take it easy.
You have been listening to the Made to Parade podcast, sponsored by the British Drum Company, where Phantom, Regimental Series and Axial Parade drums are hand-built in the UK to look amazing, sound amazing and feel amazing.